I want to talk about something else that came up in the Time magazine story and also the Meet the Press interview. As you know, Trump on the campaign trail railed about inflation a lot. This was an issue that Republicans up and down the ballot talked about a lot. So I want to play a soundbite from his interview this weekend on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker about this, about specifically grocery prices.
I went on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, you know, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries. When you buy apples, when you buy bacon, when you buy eggs, they would double and triple the price over a short period of time. And I won an election based on that. We're going to bring those prices way down.
I can verify apples have been pricier than I've liked. But I want to compare that to what he said in the Time magazine interview, also on grocery prices. This was the quote there. He said, "I'd like to bring them down. It's hard to bring things down once they're up. You know, it's very hard." Hans, what do you think's behind these comments to Time? Again, this is an issue of what is he serious about? What is he backpedaling
Well, you can verify apples. I can verify the bacon and eggs. Those are also up. I don't think that's controversial to say, but I'm glad we have our lanes defined. Look, Donald Trump is going to make a lot of promises, then he's going to walk them back, and then he's going to try to find the space for a deal. I don't think anyone, back to sort of a magical wand he may or may not have, there's nothing he can do to lower prices from where they are. He can slow the rate of incline, but if prices actually go down, we're in a deflationary situation, and that is much more scary for the economy, and that is much more devastating for growth, for people's prosperities, for people's futures. So I hear him saying there, and he's like, you know, especially in the Time magazine interview, he's giving himself a safety valve, and he's giving himself a lot of safety valves. Now, I don't know how many, to sort of torture my metaphor or switch it, I don't know how many parachutes he's going to have, right? But he is clearly packing a few. And Peter, save me from my bad analogy, right? Be my editor. For
parachutes with safety valves.
Yeah, it's fine.
You can't have too much safety.
I
don't know. Tolu, though, I want to ask you, immigration. You know, when I think about covering the Trump campaign, what is it that Trump himself cares about the most? That's what it is, right? And that's, as Peter mentioned, he has some ambitious things he says he wants to do. You've covered 3 presidents trying to do big things. What do you think is actually feasible in terms of immigration, and how much of Biden's move to the right on that policy, specifically making asylum tougher to get, do you think that Trump might keep?
I think it's important to note that Trump has sort of moderated his language or rolled back some of his promises on other issues like inflation and even on transgender issues. But when it comes to the border,
but this week.
Yeah, just this week.
Just this week.
He's
we'll
changed
see.
His, changed his tune. But on the border for the past 4 years, 8 years, he has had a singular tune. He's talked about people coming into the country, making the country worse, and saying that we need to get them out. He tried to do a lot of it in his first term. He ran into the family separation situation that his administration put forward. There was a lot of outcry. He had to roll that back. I think this time around, he's not worried as much about the outcry. He is determined to do what he can do with executive power. I don't think there is going to be a big immigration bill under his administration, no kind of comprehensive immigration bill at least. They may get something for the wall or something like that. But I think on day one, he's going to try to do what he can do with executive power. Now, he is going to run up against the limits of executive power. You cannot have the military operating as an internal immigration force because there are laws against that. And so he's going to try to do as much as he can. And it's going to disrupt some things, but he's going to be running up against the limits of his power. And Congress is going to be a bulwark against him as well.
Here's one of the paradoxes of Trump taking over at this time. And Tolu and Hans just referenced it, in effect. He said he would fight inflation. He said he would seal the border. He said he would bring down crime. All 3 of those are actually already fixed, more or less. Inflation is back to normal. Prices haven't come down, and you don't actually want prices to come down from where they are now because it gets you to deflation. But inflation.
But people are still feeling that. There is still a problem.
It is a problem, but the problem is you can't. The solution to actually bring prices down is not actually what any economist would advocate you do. They would want you to moderate the inflation rate, which has happened, and make wages go up, which is actually happening, right? The border crossings now are at a low point to where they were when Trump left office. And crime, which he says is sky high and he's going to fix, is actually at a years-long low. So he actually, in some ways, is inheriting a situation very adverse to what he said he was going to be fixing because it's already at a place where he needs to fix. So therefore, he has to demonstrate progress. So he can do what he wants on building the wall, but he's not going to bring those border numbers down a whole lot further. So he has to go after people who are already in the country. That's why you hear him focus on deportation, because the border itself, actually, right now, after Biden's belated, policy changes, has actually kind of been tightened at this point.
So he can also just declare victory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, yes, like, you know, the progress is important, and you and I will be writing stories that say, actually, you know, number of border crosses, but like, the easier, if all these challenges and problems are truly fixed, as Peter suggests, and like, I might take a slightly different view on inflation. Like the Prince this week gave a little bit of concern, but that's just the economist nerd in me. If all the problems are truly solved, he can just declare victory and say it was because of me. And I don't think anyone at this table would disagree with Donald Trump. He has a pretty easy time declaring victory, whether or not victory is right for him to declare.
I think that's something his voters like about him, actually, right? That they want that sense of that something good is happening. I mean, I've got to guarantee whether or not whatever is real on the ground. I'm hearing this.
I think when you look at Trump's theory of the case on how and why he won, it is inflation and it's immigration. And if inflation, he's powerless and he's giving himself a little bit of leeway there, that's going to put more pressure on him to do something real on immigration. Now, yes, crossings are down, but I think for when you talk to sort of core Republican voters, especially on the Hill, they're talking about a whole basket of issues when they talk about immigration. Crime gets folded into that. And so they get to this sort of really messy question of how you're going to do deportations. And what does success look like there, and what's progress look like?
But this is also where, I'm sorry, Liz, this is where when you see Trump ratcheting up and darkening his rhetoric consistently over the course of this campaign, and certainly some of his most brutal rhetoric has been around immigrants who come to this country illegally. We've seen it only continue. You make the point rightly that he can't, for many reasons, use the military to do a deportation system. But in that Time interview, he says, well, it's an invasion we should be able to use. And so we're watching him, and it's always constantly watching him shift that Overton window where people are talking about things that are unfathomable, and then you come back 5 years later and suddenly he's put it into the ether so much that it's sort of become common speak. That's, I think, what we're watching him do here, and Republicans have been priming on this over the course of the last several years in legislation they know is never going to get passed. But quite frankly, I'm just waiting for the moment that the Senate bill that was so bipartisanly negotiated, that Democrats really gave so many things to Republicans on, and Donald Trump ultimately killed in the Senate. I'm just waiting for that to come back around and for Trump to say, it's a great bill, I'm ready to do it now.
And Kirsten Sinema will be watching that with a martini.
From the wings.
From Switzerland, I think, something behind that bill. Toulouse, I want to ask you about this idea going forward that we're in this we're seeing some darker rhetoric from Trump. We're seeing this kind of intensity. But Democrats, what is their plan right now for dealing with Trump 2.0, and especially on immigration? That's something that they care about, obviously, as well.
Ali said it pretty clearly. They're not putting their hair on fire for every little thing that Trump says or says that he's going to do. They're watching and waiting, not focusing as much on his rhetoric, not responding every time he tweets or says something that's out of the mainstream, but watching for him to do things and really picking their spots. I think on immigration, on areas that could impact vulnerable communities, those are the areas they're going to stand up and try to block Trump, or at least call him out on some of his more extreme actions. I think some of the other areas they're going to say they're working with him. They're going to try to show that they're working with him. We saw Tammy Baldwin, the senator from Wisconsin today, or earlier this week, say that she was going to support one of Trump's cabinet nominees. You saw John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, meeting with cabinet nominees from Trump's side as well. And so they're going to try to show that they're working with him on certain issues so that when they do block him, it sounds like they are taking the measure of the actual issue and not just blocking him just because his name is Trump.
Yeah, the Democratic Party's moved to the right on immigration. They've moved a lot towards Trump on immigration. We've kind of hinted at that. They've done the same with China. Both of those are sort of the big things
Maybe
that were
even more
sort
on
of
China.
big things that were. I mean, Donald Trump basically convinced Joe Biden to reimpose the very tariffs that everyone in this town thought were sort of completely unprecedented. Biden not only reimposed them, but amped them up a little bit, and now Trump wants to go even further on the dial. To me, on the sort of congressional angle on immigration, vulnerable Democrats, and you saw this in that special election, and I believe it was New York 3 or 4, the George Santos seat where Tom Suozzi, right? Yeah. Suozzi ran to the right on immigration, and that's the template. A Democrat from Long Island, for those of us that don't speak fluent, like sort of, New York 3, what that means, sort of a district that was traditionally Democratic but got a little Trumpy. And the template for Democrats in tough Trump districts. And remember, there are going to be 13 or 14 of them in this kind of House Democrats that are going to be representing districts that were won by Donald Trump. Their pathway is to ape and to mimic his language and support him on immigration. And that's going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch play out.
Got to acknowledge my Hudson Valley girl over here, Allie. We can talk about New York.
But it's absolutely right? I mean, you even look further north in the Pat Ryan district, and even where Mike Lawler, my hometown district, was running for re-election, Democrats, Lawler, of course, a Republican, but Democrats were talking about the immigration issue in large part because it is no longer a theoretical issue in New York. The fact that migrants had been bused to New York City, that this is a key thing that Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, is consistently dealing with. He is having active meetings with Tom Homan and other key members of the Trump administration. It's no longer theoretical, and that's why I think Democrats are going to use places like New York as a template. The only Democrats who feel good, and it's not all of them, but it's some of them, are House Democrats, because they look at the fact that they have, 215 seats now. That is way more than they had at the outset of the last Trump administration. They won seats back in places like New York, and they are going to be looking to replicate it, especially because it is a game of little baby inches for them to actually get the majority, and that is the thing that Hakeem Jeffries wants more than anything.
And let me say out loud, the Democrats would be in the majority at the House if it weren't for redistricting in North Carolina, actually, when you do the math together. All right, Peter, let me bring it back to Trump and what's going on with his agenda. Let's talk about his advisors. Stephen Miller is someone who's prominent. He's been part of this discussion of, do you do two bills or one bill in the Senate and the House, which is going to be a risky, difficult decision. But how do you see the inner circle around Trump right now? What do the tribes look like of influence?
Yeah, it's different than last time, right? The last time, obviously, you had these three main tribes. You had the Bannon, warriors on the far right. You had the establishment folks represented by Reince Priebus, the former RNC chair, who became chief of staff. And you had this sort of family, right? Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, who represented their own sort of fiefdom within the White House. This time around, people say, well, there aren't the same kind of tribes because there aren't any ideologically diverse people. They're all kind of on the far right. He's gotten rid of the establishment, the conventional Republicans. He's not going with any John Kellys and H.R. McMasters and Jim Mattis's. And that's true to a point. But there are still tribes. It just maybe, I think it's more personality-based, right? You've got Elon Musk out there, and you've got Boris Epstein, and you've got all of them playing their own games to some extent, and often at odds with each other underneath the carpet. And Trump doesn't necessarily mind that. He is a chaos agent. He likes them to kind of mix it up. But then there are moments when he gets tired of it. He thinks somebody's trying to profit off him, and that's when their heads get chopped off. So I think that right now it doesn't look the same as last time, but there will be tribal warfare that will play out.
Are there real policy differences between those tribes?
I don't think so. I mean, yes, but not in the same way, right? I mean, you do have so it's interesting that he chose to go with the fire breathers on, say, Justice Department, FBI, DNI, HHS, but he didn't on Treasury. Right? He went with a more conventional choice who was acceptable to Wall Street. He went with a more acceptable choice as State Department in Marco Rubio, who'd reassure people. So he does still have some people in there who are not of the MAGA, the MAGA-born crowd. But we know who's in charge here.
Tolu, it isn't all about the press, although Trump loves to talk about us. Thanks. Are you preparing for any changes in how things work at the White House when the Trump administration comes in? What are you thinking?
Well, there will be changes, but if you look at the last week, Trump has had a pretty conventional week when it comes to press. He did Meet the Press. He did the Time interview. He was the Time Person of the Year. He did a long interview with Time. Trump is someone who wants to be covered by the mainstream media. As much as he denigrates the press, as much as he talks negatively about the press, he craves the attention of the press. He wants to be watched, he wants to be tweeted about, he wants to be written about by mainstream organizations like the New York Times, like the Washington Post. He wants to be everywhere, even though he did a lot of podcasts during his campaign. He comes from the New York media environment, and he came up during the heyday of the mainstream media, and so he still thinks that way. So I imagine that there will be changes. His aides will want to try to bring more sort of right-wing populist media figures into the White House. But I think Trump, his instinct is to have the main networks cover him, to have the main newspapers cover him, to be watching how the mainstream media covers the story of his second administration. And I think for that reason, we'll still have access, we'll still be covering him, and he'll still be engaging with reporters because he craves it. He feeds off of it. He wants to be in front of the limelight.
In our last 2 minutes here, a bigger question that might be provocative or not, I don't know. From a conversation I was having with Peter earlier, it is said that we have one president at a time. However, President-elect Trump has not been scared to represent the United States in a sort of head of state kind of way around the world, including in Paris, France. So my question to you, is he already starting the job?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And he's signaling and he's forcing people to make decisions, which is the main thing a president can do, is to sort of be forced to tell you where they are. He had Justin Trudeau down to Mar-a-Lago. Tomorrow there's a big football game, Army-Navy. Don't think the president's scheduled to attend. Who's going? Donald Trump.
But part of that is also Biden clearly ceding that space for a number of reasons that we don't have time to detail. There is also the fact that Biden's big news this week was the pardons and the clemency that he gave to thousands of people.
You're forgetting about his economic speech. How dare you?
How dare I?
How dare you tie his victory lap on the economy? How dare you?
Flog me after. But really, I mean, Biden has ceded that space to Trump, I think, reading the mood of Washington, certainly. But yeah, Trump is keen to start.
Yeah, there is one president at a time, and it's Donald Trump right now. I mean, that's the honest truth. You're right, exactly. Who did he invite? He invited to his inauguration Xi Jinping, and according to reports, Xi Jinping isn't going to come, but that's a pretty unprecedented thing, too. He has already begun moving, as Hans said, and in terms of negotiating with foreign partners, he represented the United States at Notre Dame.
Or in the case of Canada with foreign governors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Governor Trudeau.
Exactly.
Well, go ahead,
Trump knows how to dominate the media cycle. Biden has struggled over the last 4 years with that, and we're seeing it play out.
Well, there's only one ambassador to Greece at a time, and it is not yet Kimberly Guilfoyle. Has been nominated, so there we go.
It's George Souness. Great man.
All right. Unfortunately, we need to leave it there for now. I have